Yo, don't ask me what I did today. I did nothing. I did absolutely nothing, okay? I'm a failure, and I'm giving up on everything, and you're never going to hear from me again. No, I'm kidding, of course. I'm not kidding about the fact that I did get absolutely nothing done today. I have a problem. I don't know if this is ADHD or what it is, but my sense of focus is like a train. It gets on one track, and as soon as I've gotten on that track, that's it. It's over. I am barreling down that track, and it is borderline impossible to get me off of it. If I go and watch a movie, I lay down on my couch. I'm not getting it up. I'm not getting it up. You know what I'm talking about. No, I'm not getting up. No matter what happens, I'm gonna lay there and watch like 10 movies in a row. If I start playing a game, I'm playing that for the rest of the day. If I start working on my game like I'm supposed to be doing, I'll be doing that till 4 in the morning. And if, like today, I open my phone and for even just a goddamn split second look at something on social media, I'm doom scrolling for the rest of the day. That's my plan for the day. And I can't help it, man. It's my biggest weakness. It becomes an insurmountable obstacle to get me off a certain path once I'm going down it. It's very annoying. Well, I was thinking that maybe this had something to do with having ADHD because I think there are traits like that might run in my family, but I don't know. I don't like to think of it as, I feel like a lot of the time nowadays people diagnose themselves with these kinds of things and use it as, I don't know, a label for themselves as if it's part of their identity. I'm not a fan of that. And I feel like different kinds of brains, maybe not all of them, obviously there are some like totally legitimate real disabilities and mental illnesses, but certain types of brains I think are only seen as disabilities because of the way we structure certain things socially, but evolutionarily for most of human existence wouldn't really have been a problem. Like I feel like ADHD inherently would not be a problem in the wild, but it is a problem when you got to wake up at a certain time, when you got to go to work at a certain time, when you got to focus on things. But if you're just living out in the wild, I just have to hunt for food and have sex and take care of my kids. I mean, then I could probably do that pretty well. but so long as life is more structured and rigid and so complicated, well, now it becomes a problem. Got to remember to do my taxes. Got to remember to, I don't know, whatever other things you're supposed to do in life. But you get my point. So anyway, I did basically nothing today. I had a back and forth with the dude designing the logo, the new logo for my company. His handwriting is still a little too nice for my liking. He's clearly a very talented calligrapher, and ironically, that's kind of a problem here because I'm increasingly wanting something ugly. But nonetheless, I gave him some more feedback today. Hopefully, I'll end up with something because I generated an AI image for that signature and it works really well. And I'm finding myself falling in love with it more and more every day. It's really quite perfect. And yet, I still have this discomfort with using something AI made for my thing. But I don't know, kind of losing the distaste for it. But I'm hoping this guy comes up with something with this more feedback. I don't know. I mean, I did pay for this too, so it'd be nice if my money didn't go to waste. And then I was going to start writing these. The point of what I was supposed to do today was to start making some promotional videos, these special ideas I had for making TikToks and shorts to help promote my game further, which I think is still possibly a good bet, but I didn't do that. I didn't do that because at some point in the day, I can't even tell you at what point, I can't even tell you what I was looking at, but I opened my phone, I looked at social media, and that was it. And then for the rest of the day, I just did that. I went to the gym at least, as I usually do. My diet is still good. And I had so much energy today, too. I woke up and I was like, bro, I am in the fucking zone, man. And now, well, actually, I still have more energy, but I wasted it all day on stupid bullshit on social media. All right. One good thing about these videos is it forces me to reflect at the end of the day. And I don't just mean in terms of when I'm sitting here talking like this, but also in the sense of thinking about the fact that as I'm getting to the end of the day, I want to just give up and go to bed and not get anything else done. But I'm like, oh no, gotta make my video now. Gotta make my daily diary. And that requirement alone forces me into a mode of reflection where I'm like, okay, see, like right before this, I was thinking, yo, I might walk down the street and go get some McDonald's, completely ruining my newly found healthy diet. But then because I had to make this video and then I gotta walk all the way down the street to get there and everything, I was like, nah, I'm gonna make my proper meal. So here I am now cooking my lentils and veggies coming up right now while I make this video. Unfortunately, it's almost 1 in the morning, but still an improvement for me. So I'm happy with how everything's going, other than the fact that I just didn't do anything today. I wasted my time on stupid ass social media. So I need to ban myself from it somehow. Maybe if I hire someone, like with the amount of time, you know what? With the amount of time that I waste on social media bullshit, I could probably efficiently save time by hiring someone at minimum wage to punch me in the face every time I open my phone. You know what I'm saying? Like it would probably pay off because I'd be able to get my game done earlier and then that might pay off in that way. I don't know. It's worth considering. And what did I even read about? I watched videos. I'm not even going to tell you what I watched because it's so fucking embarrassing. The YouTube videos I watched, the shit that I read on Reddit, it's all just stupid. It's all like drama bait, garbage, nonsense. God damn it. Since I got better sleep last night, I'm noticing my brain is functioning better. I'm speaking more straightforwardly. This is a big improvement. I think I'm also just getting more comfortable sitting in front of the camera and going off. This is good. I'm getting there, folks. I'm getting there. Now, there was one thing that I was thinking about today, something that was on my mind that I wanted to talk about. Oh, yeah. Do I feel like talking about that? I guess I'll briefly mention it. It's kind of interesting. So, I saw a news article about Microsoft laying off some thousand or so workers from Xbox and closing a bunch of studios, canceling some projects. And there's been a lot of talk over the past year or two. Every time there's these layoffs, as there's been a lot of them, people talking about CEOs being greedy and these companies all being greedy and they're destroying art by shutting down these studios and all this kind of stuff. And it's got me thinking about like whenever people talk about these things, they always frame it in villainous terms. Like Microsoft does this because they're a bunch of selfish, greedy pieces of shit, right? When Electronic Arts does this, they're all terrible. But as I have now been running my own business, it has allowed me to understand a new topic called economics. And it's gotten me to realize, see, and I would have been one of those people. When I was younger, I also would have been like, oh, it's all these greedy CEOs, these people who hate art, and when I say younger, I'm not even talking super young. Honestly, I probably would have been like that even 6 years ago, let's say. But being forced to run my own thing now, I'm able to better. It's not just about running my own business, but also maturing in a way where I increasingly try to put myself in other people's shoes when I'm thinking about why they do what they do, as opposed to just assuming right off the bat that they must be up to some no good bullshit, right? And when you think about these companies doing these things, generally speaking, they're always trying to make a profit. So if they shut studios down, it's not because they hate art or whatever. It is, of course, and not that anyone disagrees with this, because they're trying to save money. They do projections, and their projection suggests to them these studios are not profitable. Now, some of the time, maybe they are to blame because they buy a small studio and then they mismanage the studio, and because of that, they end up releasing a shit game, and that's why they have to close it down. But even there, You also have to look at the fact that, well, whoever owned that smaller studio also saw dollar signs, because then they decided to sell their company to this bigger company. And they knew that part of the risk is that this bigger company might come in and mismanage whatever made their studio great in the first place and ruin it. So there's always blame to go around everywhere. And my bigger point here, anyway, is that in these situations, realistically, what do you expect a company to do? Like, if you have this studio you bought or this group of people you've hired to work on a project, and you can see that you're not going to make your money back on that project, what else can you do? You, if you don't fire those people, if you decide to just be a good guy and keep everyone on to keep them on those paychecks, well, in the long run, let's say the game gets finished, it goes out, and then it fails as was expected. Well, now everyone loses their jobs anyway. And not only that, but since you decided to go all the way with it and you spent all of that money, you are now in an even worse position as a company to even be able to recover from that. Whereas if you do it earlier on, you can at least save some money and possibly get the company back on track, and you might be able to rehire some of those people later. But as it is, if you just let it go, you're going to have to fire all of those people in the long run, assuming that your projections are correct. So there isn't really like any good way or any nice thing for companies to do in these situations. It's oftentimes necessary to do this. There might be, I don't know, you might even think to yourself, okay, what about like a CEO? They make some multiple millions of dollars, and then they go and fire 100 regular workers. Well, couldn't you just take away the money from the CEO or fire his ass? But then the problem with this economically is the people who are, let's say, at the board of directors of these bigger companies, they don't select these CEOs who are just greedy or whatever. They don't intentionally select greedy dumbasses because they're all stupid, right? It's such a like childish way of looking at things. It's safe to say that they pick the person who they think, in fact, is the most competent person to run a profitable company. And if they were to try to solve these problems when the company is in trouble, and oftentimes they bring these guys in precisely to figure out how to restructure a company that looks like it might be getting into trouble. And if they were to strip the CEO, let's say, of money to try to save a company, well, then other CEOs around the country, other business executives who are good at what they do, they might look at that and be like, well, I'm not going to go work for those guys because apparently they just like lower your paycheck if something's going wrong with the company or if you screw up. And since nobody wants to work there, well, now it's harder for you to find someone who's competent and qualified. Like, you want to offer the most money, the most bonuses to hopefully attract the best candidate for managing your company. Now, a lot of people, especially gamers and stuff, don't want to like think about this in this way because it's like, oh, they're all just greedy, they're all just like this. But if you play out the economics like this in your head, it makes sense. There isn't really anyone twirling their mustache here, rubbing their hands together. It just really is the most logical, profitable thing to do. Even when it comes to things that I agree that I hate in games nowadays, like microtransactions and excessive live service models, I hate everything about how these kinds of games are made today. But I can now step back and see why this is done. Because for all the complaining, for all the desire to preserve the art for the sake of art, at the end of the day, these companies look at their analysis and they see, well, we make more money when we do this. And that's it. And that's all that matters, right? You can even be objectively correct. And I think I am, and others who complain about this are objectively correct, that this makes games worse. It totally does. But that's kind of the end result of if you're trying to make the most money. Now, you might, of course, also say, well, why does everything have to be about money? But the reality is, of course, is that you need resources to be able to make things. And this is getting into the other thing that I was thinking about, which is a lot of people now, it's become kind of trendy to blame everything on capitalism. Okay. Now, this is not to say that I am a fan of any particular political or social economic system or anything like that. But just to say that people oftentimes, when they complain about capitalism, they're not really complaining about capitalism. They're complaining about economics, about just the reality that there are limited resources in the world. So, for example, when these studios get shut down, you might hear someone online say something like, oh, capitalism, because everyone's just chasing profits. Well, okay, let's suppose we lived in some hypothetical socialist system. Maybe it's a system where we distribute the resources based on demographic vote or a democratic vote. Okay, so how would we distribute those resources? Well, we would probably vote based on what seems most important to people and what people care about the most. So if you went, let's say 1 year, you managed to get enough resources to make your game project from our hypothetical socialist economy, and you go and you make that game and you release it, and it turns out people either don't like it, or maybe it's not even that they don't like it or that it's not good, it's just that not enough people care about it. Not enough people got anything out of it. So the next year, your community gets together and they vote again. And what are they going to vote for? Well, they're not going to give you resources again, are they? Because you didn't get enough out of your project that you put into it. So you see what I'm saying? Like, there is no hypothetical magical scenario in which you don't have to do the equation of how many resources am I putting into this and what am I getting out of it. Even in cases where you're not thinking in terms of profit, something like, you know, how we pay taxes for public services like the police or firefighters or medical services. Even there's a kind of equation about the profit we get out of it, because we look at it as like, well, we pay taxes for police services because if we didn't have police, it would be a lot harder to, well, manage society and to own things without there being constant criminality happening. Or without firefighters, potentially we could lose enormous amounts of property if just one accidental fire happens. The point is, there are things we get out of this that if we didn't have it, we actually would be worse off economically. It's more like indirect and abstract, but there's always some kind of calculation of what do we get out of what we're putting into this. And so this has all made me think that, because it's a very youthful and naive kind of way of looking at the world and just being like, it's caused by greed, it's caused by this. And don't get me wrong, that's not to say that there aren't greedy people or that there aren't unethical people or that there aren't CEOs who legitimately are psychopaths, or that there aren't situations where business owners try to organize their companies in such a way as to maximize short-term profits while potentially damaging their company in the long term. But much of the time, one can generally say people aren't doing those things. It's just the reality that there are limited resources in the world. And when you're running a business, at some point or another, you have to make hard decisions. And I feel like younger people might be able to understand this better. Certainly I would have, if at some point I had been forced to learn something about economics by running my own business. I feel like it should maybe be a course in high school, maybe for a month or a semester or something, that you run, hell, even something as simple as a lemonade stand. So you get the idea of having to pay attention to the resources in, resources out element of this and how it all works and why you might be forced into making tough decisions sometimes. So anyway, yeah, it was just something that occurred to me because I see people bringing that up a lot now, all the time, about capitalism stuff, and I'm not so convinced that this is about capitalism so much as it is a combination of just how economics works, combined with, to be fair, in many cases, what I think is people's natural desire to be greedy. And I think that's also why it's so easy to be in a position when you are yourself, like if you've never run a business yourself and it's easy enough to sit back and be like, well, if I was in their position, I would do this or I would do that. But it's safe to say that most people's minds change when they are presented with a lot of money, right? Like you look at every single industry and everyone seems to, I shouldn't say everyone, but a significant portion of people, once they see those dollar signs, they will make the decisions that make them more money. If everyone was such a pure, high integrity indie developer, no one would even sell their companies to bigger companies in the first place. Everyone does that usually because they want to make more money. Maybe if we're being generous, they do it because they think it'll give them more resources so they can make bigger projects. But like I said before, they also always know that the risk is you don't have as much control anymore and you can just as easily end up screwing up your whole company. And the safer, but also the harder route, if you want to preserve your artistic integrity, is to do everything yourself and ignore the dollar signs. But it's hard to do that. And the other problem with this, in terms of looking at it as like a capitalism problem, which I think there are a lot of issues with how the economy works in terms of lack of regulations. I imagine there are lots of ways in which we could have better regulations, but you can also see how it's really hard to come up with how you would protect or prevent certain bad situations from happening. For example, when you think of a company where some high up executive, a CEO, is making decisions that are for the sake of short term profits at the expense of a company's long term well being, which could very well end up screwing the people who work in that company. That's the kind of thing where we might think to ourselves, okay, we should make some kind of regulation so CEOs can't do that. But then there are situations where whatever it is that a CEO would do in that case, like that actually is the smart thing to do in certain situations. You know what I mean? Like it's not, there is no single correct way to run a business to ensure its long-term success. So there are some situations where like firing like laying off a bunch of people in your company might save you some money right now. And there are situations where that makes sense, where that will allow your company to survive, and then maybe you can rehire some of those people in the future. I don't think that we should put in regulations that would prevent someone from being able to do that, obviously. But then there are situations where probably a bunch of people get laid off because of some genuine corruption or mismanagement on behalf of the CEO, or it's just trying to make some kind of quick long-term profit so he looks good as a CEO, but he's actually totally screwing the company in the long run. So that's a situation where we don't want that happening. That's ordinary people getting screwed. But the trick here is, how do you distinguish between the two? How do you regulate this in such a way that you can tell a business executive when they are or are not allowed to lay off employees in certain situations? You get what I'm saying? I'm not saying it's impossible. Maybe there are ways that that could be regulated, but it seems to me like it would be really hard to write that in a specific way where you're not ultimately going to be restricting the ability of decent or honest business people who just have to make a hard decision. And if you do restrict them like that unintentionally in the wrong way, well, then you end up screwing the economy in other ways, because then people have to keep people on their payrolls who they can't afford to pay in the long run. And who knows how many other knock on effects there might be from something like that, right? So, anyway, for the record, I'm pretty amateur and new to all of this. So I'm also largely talking out my ass about half of this stuff. So it's totally possible I said some total bullshit here. But nonetheless, the basics of what I'm getting at here, I think makes perfect sense and is what I have learned over the past few years, which is that in most of these cases, like every time I see people complaining about, like, look at these greedy companies laying all these people off, whatever, is just, I don't know. Every time I see it, all I can think is like, well, if these companies were profitable, they wouldn't be laying these people off. If they could afford to keep them on, they would. I mean, if you have a studio that you own and it's going to make you money, why would you close it? Why would you lay those people off? These companies are trying to make money. So if they do that, it's safe to say that in most cases, they don't have the money to keep them going. Their projections are showing them they're not going to be able to make a profit off of this. And this isn't capitalism. This is just like, yeah, you can't like keep unsustainably trying to keep something open if you're not going to get anything in return for it. And in the long run, you're going to end up screwing everyone anyway if you do try to do that because you think you're being a good guy. So, yeah. I mean, that's all I wanted to say about that. And since I had nothing else, I didn't do anything else today. That's all I got for you. But I'll have something tomorrow. Tomorrow, I'll be back here with a sick report on the awesome videos I made for promoting my game. And I'm going to have that done by the end of this weekend. And I'm going to get back to working on the full version of the game. You can bank on it, future Matt. Come back and watch this, and you'll see. I predicted the future.